Bonjour. Okay. I'm a writer, not a speaker, so please bear with me. I'm really excited to be here. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Leslie for inviting me to this event. And to this amazing young woman's point, you're not crazy. I know nobody here thinks that they are, but Dr. Fred and I were just in Amsterdam last week. There are a lot of crazy people there going through the same thing. There are a whole lot in the United States, which is what I will talk about, but this is a international pandemic, which is what a pandemic is, and I think that your country is going to wake up eventually. So, my name is David Connor. I've been following and writing about developments relating to Lyme and associated tick-borne diseases for about 2 years. And let me just give you a little bit of brief background on me so you know where I'm coming from. The first 10 years of my career was as a writer for a nonprofit organization that contracted with various public health organizations, including the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And that's where I attained a relative fluency with medical research. In my early 30s, I had a burgeoning side career as a freelance entertainment and LGBT writer. And that was sidelined suddenly when I got sick in my early 30s. So you know the story. I had numbness and pain in my feet and legs, blurry vision, then I had double vision, then I had transient paralysis, vertigo, cluster headaches, and all kinds of other things. I had a lot of tests, as I'm sure all of you have, MRIs, EEGs, EMGs, ECGs, evoked potentials, NCVs, and other things. Lots of doctors, neurologists, rheumatologists, allergists, a neuro-ophthalmologist, a psychologist who was crazy, by the way. He was actually crazy. Lots of money, lots of time, little hope, less hope every time I went to a new doctor, and a psychiatrist who I presently see and have seen for 7 years. And by the way, my psychiatrist is pretty incredible. She's a holistic doctor. She loaded me up on psychotropic medications when I first went to see her. 7 years later, just a couple months ago, she said, "David, I have a new patient who was referred to me by a doctor. She's been going to a lot of doctors, and oh my God, she's you. She has all of your symptoms." So I ordered her the blood test for Lyme disease, and she was off the charts positive. So my psychiatrist diagnosed her new patient with Lyme disease because of our conversations, and that's what you're doing. It's what all of us are doing, and to think that, I would just ask you to put it out of your mind to think we shouldn't have to do this, we shouldn't be doing this. You know, I'm not a doctor, I don't have any information. People keep telling me that my experience is a valid form of knowledge, and I'm going to tell all of you that. You are better educated about this than most of the doctors that you see. You should have confidence in that. People aren't going to want to hear everything from you, but you need to make sure that you force this information to them. And I usually say, this sounds crazy. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't have this. But you need to know about it. Just stick it in your back pocket in case, God forbid, it becomes relevant in your life. So anyway, eventually, after all of that, I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease, which is an inner ear imbalance. And then through a bizarre twist of fate, the very same day, while I was sitting there waiting for my diagnosis, my mother emailed me a photocopy of a prescription I was given when I was 19 years old in 1997, which was doxycycline 200 milligrams for 10 days to treat Lyme disease. That helped to motivate me to find a specialist. I grew up in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is one of the world's hot spots for Lyme disease at this point. My sister works for the county government there, and a full half of her coworkers or their children have Lyme disease. So she referred me to a doctor who most of her colleagues go to. And this doctor treats Lyme as a personal passion, as most doctors do who treat it. because her son contracted Lyme disease a few years ago when he was a child, and every doctor he went to said, no, you don't have that. Prior to that, she was awakened again in 1997 when her nephew's heart stopped in his early 20s, and he was diagnosed in Boston with Lyme carditis, and fortunately he didn't die from it, but he could have. So she's committed to that. And her compassion restored my faith in humanity, in myself, and in my sanity. But the antibiotic treatment didn't seem to help much at first. It seemed to make everything worse, as you probably understand. And then about 5 months in, suddenly I felt so much better. So it took 5 months. So then this relates to a study that was done last year called the PLEASE study, which supposedly evaluates the effectiveness of prolonged antibiotic treatment in Lyme patients, but the term of that study was only for 3 months. In my personal experience, I didn't feel any better for 5 months, and so had I been enrolled in that study, that is just one of the many limitations of that study. So that's why when I talk about research being needed, that's part of where I'm coming from. So just bear that in mind. So as soon as my faculties came back, I wanted to write again because I hadn't been able to think for a long time. So I snagged an interview with my favorite musician, Tori Amos, and some other celebrities, and that was the origin of this Huffington Post blog. So I was excited about feeling better, more excited about getting my ability to think back, and probably most excited to know that yes, something was physically wrong with my body. I knew that, I really did know that, but I had so much doubt and confusion because of the years of doctors telling me either, I think this is an anxiety and you need to take another pill, this may all be in your head, or I'm sorry, something is probably wrong with you, but we just are not sophisticated enough to understand. Now that last diagnosis, which I consider a diagnosis, I appreciate and respect. If people don't know about this, then that's fine, but telling people that it's in their head, I think, is malpractice. So after I began to feel better, I told somebody close to me, who I work with actually, who supervises me, and who had witnessed the slow degradation of my health over a lot of years, that I had been diagnosed with Lyme again, and that I was really optimistic. I hoped that I would feel better. And he was very sympathetic and compassionate and happy for me, but then he closed the door and said, if I could give you one word of advice, I would just suggest being really careful about who you tell. And I said, what do you mean? I'm going to tell everybody I know so that in case they ever experience anything like this or their kids do, they'll know what's going on. And he said, oh, okay, I understand. But, people talk. So you might just want to limit it to people that you're really comfortable with and trust. I knew that he meant well, but the fact is I grew up gay in the 1980s and 1990s. It was not an easy thing for me. Times were very different back then, and I was never in the closet over anything. Then I spent 10 years working to destigmatize taboo health issues, including HIV, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and other diseases, and there was no way that I was going to go into any closet at that point in my life. So I took his words to heart, and I thought I should be careful about who I tell, so I will tell the whole world. And yeah, I didn't know if anybody would even read this, but so I wrote a 3-part essay about my ordeal with Lyme disease. The first part was about my experience with it and how crazy it was. The second part was about what was to me a surreal irony, that all my life I had feared contracting HIV, which is now, by the way, a treatable, manageable illness that most people can live a full, healthy life with, because of activism like this. Otherwise, that would not have happened, by the way. So I ended up with a new disease that is so taboo that nobody will treat it or even talk about it or acknowledge it. And it degrades the body and the mind in ways similar to the way that I feared AIDS would, all of my life, this was like the boogeyman, and there was something else sneaking up behind me. Actually, it was inside of me from basically the onset of my adulthood. So that really made me angry. So I wrote this essay. And I thought it was a cathartic self-indulgence. It was published in the evening, and within a few hours, I had several emails from other Lyme patients, a researcher, and a Lyme specialist affiliated with iLads. And then by morning, I had 300 messages and hundreds of new followers on Twitter, and most of those were people saying, "How did you find help? I need help. I'm desperate." And I am not qualified or equipped to do that, but what I thought I could do is keep writing about this. So from that point on, most of my writing has actually been dedicated to investigating Lyme, except around our election when I switched into a different kind of activism mode because talk about surreal. That was as strange as Lyme disease and continues to be. So first I wrote from a personal perspective, then I began to cover developing news that I didn't see being picked up by major media, and then finally public policy and science. And here's just a little bit of what I've learned. And as I say this, I'm going to ask for your open-mindedness. Everything about Lyme is controversial, including things within the Lyme disease community to a great extent. And I believe that that's great. I don't mind people arguing with me, and I don't mind at all arguing with people. I was kind of cultured to do that. It's my personality. The more we debate, even hotly debate, the more we're going to come closer to resolution. So please just keep that in mind. So first and foremost, the primary thing I've learned is that Lyme disease patients more often than not are marginalized, oftentimes irreparably traumatized by medical practitioners who mindlessly follow recommendations. Recommendations, not rules, but they've become rules from federal, state, or in your case, provincial agencies, and dismiss patient after patient after patient who present with similar and consistent symptoms across the board. They tell us, as I was told, and as I know many of you have been told, that your illness is either a product of anxiety, a cry for attention, or a more serious mental illness that requires medication. Many doctors do this, I've also learned, because number one, they're conditioned to do so, as most of us, I think, are, until we end up in this bizarre world, as I certainly was, to believe absolutely in the absolute righteousness of federal agencies and what is called peer consensus. Now, I say what's called peer consensus because a lot of the agencies and the non-governmental organizations that represent these groups, infectious disease specialists in particular, consistently claim peer consensus where there isn't actually any peer consensus. They're just dismissing information that they themselves don't publish. So that's a problem. That's anti-science, which is a term that they use against us as a weapon. But even when that consensus is contradicted by scores of these doctors' own seriously ill patients. So that to me is the most egregious part about doctors who are negligent with Lyme disease patients, is that they see us, they examine us, and after you have even just a dozen, but dozens, scores, hundreds of patients coming in areas like mine and dismiss all of them, something is wrong with you as a diagnostician. You should have greater curiosity than that. You should be more interested, more intellectually invested in diagnostics and not just go down a checklist. Anyway, so some doctors who may want to help their patients, another thing I've learned, and who have conducted independent research still cannot bring themselves to do so for fear of condemnation by their peers. And of course, in the interest of maintaining solvent and profitable businesses. It's a real threat. And if you put yourself in the place of these doctors, without any personal affiliation with Lyme disease, if you're honest, it's a very courageous thing that anybody does to treat Lyme patients. So any physicians who are here, the sincerest thank you. I mean, you're truly heroes because you're risking everything. Medical education is not easy or cheap. So, there's a lot to pay back. At the same time, I have to tell you, I've witnessed the Lyme community undermining its own efforts and losing sight of the reason why we're fighting for patient parity. Don't get me wrong, please, I understand the passion, but we do have a few problems. For example, this is just a personal example. If I publish a story, for example, a very long, as I want to do, 4,000-word story about federal research funding, which is thoroughly researched, I believe, and I attribute all of my statements, or as many as I can, and then I disclose when something is my personal opinion or bias. I'm trying to stick with the facts so that any random person coming across this article, if they may have Lyme disease, this may help them get to a point of figuring out what it is, or give them faith that it's not all in their head. But for other people, it's so important to, I get the passion, I fully understand it, but people who don't personally experience this can't relate to it. And so there may be an inclination to think that some very passionate people are a little crazy. And I am that person, but so I try to make sure everything is rooted in fact that's documented and I can point to reliable sources. Then I get all of these comments on the story, which I do appreciate, but sometimes comments telling me that I didn't get the whole story about Lyme. Well, I'm already being yelled at for writing 4,000 words instead of 500 words, and I would have to write many volumes to write everything just that I understand about Lyme, and that's not the whole story. So, you can't make everybody happy. I get told that I'm obscuring the truth about Lyme, which was created as biological warfare agent by Nazis at Plum Island, that Lyme is a genetically engineered shapeshifter, a viral hybrid that takes on many different forms, that X, Y, or Z supplement are the true cure. Antibiotics are deadly and you should buy my supplement. And I understand where all of this comes from, which is from a lot of different directions, but when these things are public and somebody sees this tied to an article, then it can get pretty murky. So imagine being a medical doctor who reads an evidence-based essay making a case for treating Lyme disease patients from a Lyme disease patient, even against opposition from within their own professional community, and then reading these comments, even dismissing the conspiracy theories. The sheer abundance and self-contradiction of some of the information might make anyone just want to keep a safe distance because it's a huge investment to take a leap of faith like this. Last year I spoke on Capitol Hill in DC, and which is our version of this, which is not nearly as beautiful as this, and I met with congressional staff of several different members of Congress, and all of them honestly seemed actively engaged and attentive. The health staffer from a prominent senator's office was very interested, and I believe he was legitimately interested. He said that the senator truly, honestly wants to do something to help Lyme disease patients, but he said that his office is visited regularly by different people who represent different groups, who tell different stories, who either ask for different things or sometimes even trash talk other Lyme advocates with different opinions, or who simply go on and on about their story and don't have any actions in mind for the senator to take. They want the senator to fix the government. Everybody from the White House to 535 members of Congress to all health agencies, and to admit all wrongdoing. And the fact is, I'm sorry to say, that's never going to happen. One member of Congress, one public elected official, doesn't have that power, and they have to negotiate everything in their careers. So the staffer told us that if the Lyme community can't come together and come up with one or two big asks, we can't even agree on that, then they'll listen, but they will not do anything because they cannot do anything. Because no federal official is going to drop every issue of interest to its constituency to become an expert about one health concern. We can do that because it has hijacked our lives. They rely on us to do that. But our messaging has to be concise, consistent, and actionable, and it's got to be very specific. So one thing that I'm asking every Lyme advocate is to really figure out what is most important and come up with 1 or 2 actionable things, because once you get that first action ticked off, then that person or that body that made that happen is obligated to follow through. But I feel like to date and for decades, we've been self-dividing and therefore self-defeating in a lot of ways as far as advocacy goes. I have a personal agenda, and that agenda is to communicate the reality of Lyme disease to people who are getting a lot of mixed and unfocused messages. Specifically, the news in the US and Canada have covered Lyme more frequently this year. I've been tracking that, but the stories are usually limited to tick habitats are expanding because of climate change, celebrity medical mysteries solved, and be sure to check for ticks. And that's not good enough. Interestingly, a lot of local news organizations do a very thorough job of reporting about Lyme disease because it's affecting their community, but for the most part, national news organizations don't do that. And Lyme is not just an affliction that targets celebrities, and there's a lot more to the story than checking for ticks during tick season. This is important to me because I am a writer. The news media, I know, played a vital role in raising public awareness about HIV and AIDS in the 1980s, in destigmatizing the poorly understood disease and its victims, and putting pressure on public health officials and agencies to do more. I don't know if anybody knows this, but Ronald Reagan, our president in the 80s, didn't even say the word AIDS until 1985. And he frankly let one of his own supposedly close friends, Rock Hudson, die because it was too much of a hot topic and too taboo. The news, talk shows, entertainment, and activists changed that. And otherwise it would not have changed because the conservative government that was in place was not going to address it, no matter how many people were dying from it, which is kind of unimaginable, except all of you, I believe, can imagine that. Lyme disease is investigative news, not just lifestyle and preventive health stories. And journalists need to do a better job of understanding that. Their editors need to understand it and assign Lyme as a focus for investigative reporters, not just seasonal health reporters. So that's my agenda, to get other writers and journalists to understand that Lyme's an investigative story and encourage them to do some detective work just like doctors need to do.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Ottawa. It's a beautiful afternoon. This is one of the nicest days we've had, so it's a good day to have picked it to be here to hear the words that are being said. I'm here with my family. My son William is here and my wife Joanna. Do you guys want to just wave? My wife walks our family dog in a park just around the corner from where we live in Oakville. And there's been lots of tick disease, tick bites there, and there's been a concern in the community. We were worried about not having the bites. I didn't know that much about Lyme disease until Sue Kravitz came into my office one day. Sue, do you want to give a wave? And Sue and her husband spent a lot of time talking to me and educating me about the disease, about the concerns that the victims of the disease have, and the problems with the draft framework. So one of my roles here in Ottawa, I sit on the Standing Committee on Health, and I have to say, everybody around that table, I don't know where all my fellow members sit, but I believe that whether they're Conservative, NDP, or Liberal, we all share the concern of why does the framework differ so much from what you, the victims of Lyme disease, are experiencing and reading and hearing. And I think the last speaker did an excellent job of profiling that difference. So next week we are going to be hearing from a number of people from your community at the committee. I believe we've asked that be televised, and I think that's on Tuesday. And then on Thursday we've invited members from Health Canada who've been part of the framework structure to come, and we've structured it intentionally to put them after you. so that we can ask them the questions you want answered, and we'll understand what the core differences are in the framework and the understandings in that framework to make sure we get to the bottom of this. So I'm very, I'm not excited, but I am quite interested in seeing and hearing this discussion. I don't know where it's going to end, but please stay tuned. And I know the Minister of Health is well aware that there is an issue. She's also asked the Health Committee to look into this discrepancy. So stay tuned. Thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity just to say a few words, to let you know that we are listening. I'm certainly listening. The other members on the Health Committee are listening. Elizabeth May, as you know, the leader of the Green Party, has a significant investment in this. So you have friends in the House of Commons, and we need to get to the bottom of this discrepancy. So thank you very much. Enjoy your stay in Ottawa.
Thank you. It's nice to see a big crowd here. I'm going to read my speech just because I have a little bit of anxiety before crowds, but I want to remember everything I want to say. I've spent a week on this, so hopefully it says everything. I'm a U.S.-born and educated physician, and I've been practicing in Plattsburgh, New York since 1990. I moved up north from Florida because I met a Montreal boy when I went on holidays, and he was such an interesting fella, I just followed him on up. Moved to Canada after we were married, and I've lived in Montreal ever since. Never had a medical license to practice in Canada. I'm proud to be Canadian, and I love this country and all it stands for. Yet while living in Canada this summer of 2002, I became ill from a bite in the Laurentian Mountains. I saw numerous specialists, had MRIs, labs, emergency room visits, all within the Canadian system, without anything gained, and a massive waste of everyone's time, effort, and money. The medical system failed me miserably. I had multiple symptoms. Pain that would move from joint to joint. Everybody's probably very familiar with all these things. Flu symptoms that would come and go. Short-term memory loss, stuttering, falling, walking into things, swallowing problems, shortness of breath, air hunger, numbness, tremors, internal buzzing sensation, general weakness and fatigue, muscle twitching, drenching sweats, shaking chills, neck and spine stiffness, headache, palpitations, chest pressure, rib pain, odd skin sensations, sinus pain, poor sleep, and when I did sleep, it was unrefreshed. I went to a U.S. Lyme clinic for treatment. There I was diagnosed within the first hour as having Lyme disease and babesiosis based on symptoms. Prescriptions for antibiotics were given weeks before the IGeneX test results. The Lyme Western blot was IgM positive, and I was positive for Babesia microti. I got it in the Laurentian Mountains. I would have been treated by this doctor no matter what, and he was willing to treat me for years until I was better. For 2 years I took antibiotics, and gradually I improved. For several years after, I continued herbals and other alternative treatments. Food was a primary part of the treatment. I remained gluten, soy, sugar, and processed food free. If it were not for the support of my husband and my 2 sons, I do not think I would have been able to continue working. As was, I was only able to work for fewer days. I saw fewer patients. I had been working in a walk-in clinic. I was only able to do patients by appointments because I was so ill. As is, I missed out on years of family activities and discussions as I was just too ill to do more than sit and watch. When I started to feel better on antibiotics, one evening at dinner, I made a joke, and all discussion stopped as my 3 men looked at me, staring in surprise because it was the first time I participated in any conversation for several months. I have to admit, I was surprised too. I felt like a little of life was returning. In 2002, when I became ill, I was working at a walk-in clinic. 2003, after I started treatment, I started treating patients. By 2008, I realized I could not practice 2 types of medicine, treating chronic Lyme and treating primary care family practice. The information that I needed for the chronically ill patients was not in my family practice journal. It was at integrative medicine conferences, environmental medicine conferences, herbal conferences, and ILADS conferences. In 2009, I opened my own practice, telling my husband I would not be very busy. That was a mistake. Since then, I've seen over 2,000 patients. Most of them from Canada. almost all provinces. In all the years I practiced before I became ill, I saw very few miracles in a regular primary care practice. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. I enjoy being a doctor. But this is an entirely different practice of medicine. Since treating chronic Lyme disease, I see many miracles. I'm just amazed sometimes. Sometimes when I first see a patient, my heart just drops and I feel like I want to cry in front of them, and I think, oh my goodness, am I ever going to be able to help them? And then when they come back and they're out of the wheelchair, I say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that this was going to happen for this person. So I've seen things like people get out of wheelchairs, no longer need walkers, no longer need canes. Children with long-standing multiple symptoms get better and return to school. Special needs children begin to talk, joke, and their motor skills and schoolwork improves. Young adults get out of bed after years of being ill. People regain function, resume physical activities, return to work after being debilitated for over 12 years. For some patients, there may not be much change at all for the first 18 months. That's very disconcerting. For some patients, many symptoms will improve, but they may not regain their mobility. And getting better is not easy. It involves years of medications, herbals, strict diet, and exercise program. Years to get back to 100% of normal. Yet some note significant improvement just within the first 3 months of treatment. Now to get on to the real topic of my talk. The knowledge is not out there for doctors. From the onset of my illness, when I knew I was very ill, the question of Lyme disease was not raised. I received no treatment. There was and is inadequate information about this illness. I can remember when I was acutely ill that I thought, oh, I wonder if it could be Lyme disease. And then I said, well, no, I haven't had a tick bite. I didn't remember that I had something tiny, like a little seed on the back of my leg, because my idea of a tick was that it was big, not smaller than a poppy seed. There's no information out there about the myriad of symptoms, their long-term persistence, and how symptoms change over time. There are no treatment recommendations involving years of combinations of antibiotics. Patients are not treated based on clinical symptoms. Instead, they are only treated when their blood test is positive. Laboratory testing is inadequate. The ones who are positive by blood test are only given a brief period of antibiotics. These antibiotics are not dosed high enough, nor do they treat the pleomorphic forms of the Lyme bacteria. They are not treated for co-infections, the other infections transmitted by the tick bite, which contribute to the persistence of chronic symptoms and failure of treatment for chronic Lyme disease. This complex tick-borne illness cannot be treated by an outdated, simplistic model that we use for acute infections such as strep throat. The lack of knowledge comes from old, inadequate studies. The reasons that we are not being treated appropriately is that old studies concluded that chronic Lyme symptoms are not from active infection, that the persistence of symptoms are due to an inflammatory reaction caused by long-gone Lyme bacteria, therefore should not be treated. These studies are wrong. They never looked at co-infections, the other bacteria that come with the bite. They only gave a short course of antibiotics. They only gave low doses of antibiotics. They did not combine antibiotics. These studies then became part of evidence-based medicine recommendations. This is very significant because evidence-based medicine is based on studies and interpretation of studies. It guides the recommendations for treatment. It's a standard of care. This is what we doctors use to determine what the current treatment is. Doctors in Canada have their licenses threatened or taken from them for treating chronic Lyme disease with long-term antibiotics because they are not following the guidelines of evidence-based medicine. U.S. Lyme patients press state legislatures to pass bills allowing doctors to treat chronic Lyme disease as they see fit. The same thing needs to be done in Canada. This is what needs to be done. If the doctors were not so afraid of their boards, they would be more outspoken. But you can't imagine going through medical school and all the years it takes. You've got debt, you got a family to raise, and then you're threatened with loss of license. I mean, this is really, it's huge. It is huge. Getting back to my talk here, now I'm going to talk about faulty. The information your doctor has about chronic Lyme disease is faulty. Medical journals offer no information about the scope of symptoms or the debilitation. They don't talk about co-infections. They don't talk about the fact that these ticks carry many infections, including viruses and nematodes, nor do they recommend long-term treatment of chronic Lyme disease. Patient symptoms really need to be used as a treatment guideline. If symptoms continue in any form, then treatment should continue. Errors in medical opinions have happened in the past. In the mid-1800s, Dr. Semmelweis published studies of a 90% decrease in postpartum infection death rate in pregnant women whose deliveries were done after hand disinfection. His observations conflicted with the established scientific and medical opinions of the time, and his ideas of proper hand washing were rejected by the medical community. Medicine, just like any industry, can be biased against change. The testing for Lyme disease and co-infections is faulty. We are too reliant on labs, and the labs we are using are unreliable. You cannot exclude presence of Lyme with a test, and it is committing a gross error that will condemn the person to being chronically ill, living life on the margins rather than fully participating. We are not testing for all Borrelia species. The Lone Star tick is now in Canada, and it's passing Lyme-like infections for which there is no test. The Lyme EIA misses 35% of culture-proven Lyme disease. It has less than 65% sensitivity. A screening test should have at least 95% sensitivity. The CDC surveillance criteria for the interpretation of the Lyme Western blot, as stated on the CDC website, was never intended to be used as a diagnostic criteria. Even one band that's species-specific for Lyme, Borrelia, should be enough to make the diagnosis in a symptomatic patient. The tests are not always right. Babesia duncani is not being tested. This is a very difficult treatment to treat, and not only that, it's very difficult to get a positive test. I had 2 people out of the Toronto area that I tested in November. The test was negative. We retested 3 months later. They didn't go anywhere warm. They didn't go to the West Coast, but the Babesia was high IgM positive. Why would that be? Babesia is spread by tick bite. It's also spread by mosquito bite. So there are a lot of things that we need to think about when it comes to testing. Also, the 36 forms of Bartonella, very few are tested. And a chronically ill patient may not have the immunological response that a healthy person has. And oftentimes will test negative just simply because they're not mounting an immune response. We need to re-examine the way we look at chronic illness. We are naming and treating conditions, but not looking at the underlying microbial cause of them. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue are just words that describe symptoms. Chronic antibiotic and herbal treatment can resolve those symptoms. They eventually need no medications and are able to resume work and normal activities. Those with multiple sclerosis are treated with MS-recommended pharmaceuticals, but many respond well to long-term antibiotics. They regain function and eventually discontinue antibiotics and prescribed MS medications. Infections can be the basis of chronic medical conditions. Periodontal infections are related to cardiovascular disease. Lyme and co-infections are seen in MS, ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autoimmune disease, autism, neuropathies, psychiatric disorders such as bipolar, OCD, ADD, ADHD, depression and anxiety, not responsive to medications, suicidal behavior, and suicide completion, children's failure to thrive, behavioral disorders, gastrointestinal problems. They do not need to have joint pain or a history of tick bite. Infection can be transmitted in utero or through breast milk. Chronic medical conditions are not well understood. Pharmaceutically funded studies determine clinical treatment recommendations, but these treatments usually last forever. Further investigation into what is driving chronic illness is needed. If microbes are the cause, then these should be addressed. If the vast change in our food, contamination of our air, food, and water are contributing to chronic illness, then this needs to be addressed. We need clinics in Canada that really treat chronic Lyme disease, not like the one in BC that never followed through with any of its promises. Every doctor should recognize Lyme and co-infection symptoms and inadequacy of blood tests and be willing to treat. We need specialty clinics where doctors are familiar with the complexity of the illness, willing to diagnose and treat these patients until they are asymptomatic without fear of repercussion from their medical boards. These doctors would go to integrative medicine and ILADS conferences annually to learn all they can about treatment. Now, the next topic I think you probably heard about, but I'm going to say it anyway. The federal framework for Lyme disease action plan is nice, but it entirely misses the point. The amount of money promised is not nearly adequate for a government that is losing billions of healthcare dollars a year due to chronic illness caused by Lyme disease. Many of the patients I see have had at least 5 to 6 radiological procedures, 4 to 5 emergency room visits, multiple visits with their doctors, and they've seen at least 3 to 5 specialists. I've had one patient who's seen 12 neurologists. This is just an incredible cost to our government. This is our taxpayer money. $4 million is nothing. It's not even a drop in the bucket compared to what the government is spending. And chronic Lyme disease costs the government a lot of lost taxpayer dollars. Many are not able to function, to work, care for their families, care for themselves. Children are not able to go to school, not developing normally, have special needs. They have no chance at fitting into society as a functional adult when their years are all about suffering and not having health to pursue their dreams. This is a high cost to our society. We need adequate research. Long-term studies of Lyme transmission between sexual partners, in utero Lyme transmission, and through breast milk to the newborn. This information needs to be known by all physicians, not just those treating chronic Lyme disease. We need to research our immunological responses to infections and improve testing. Why is it that the fragile, chronically ill patient's asymptomatic spouse may test highly positive with a Lyme Western blot, but the patient can test negative? This is really something to think about. This is pretty amazing. It's time also to look at medicine, not only as a field that's made progress in saving human lives, but also as an industry, which, just like the pharmaceutical industry, the chemical industry, the food industry, is all about control of information, underlying power, profit, and exclusion of competitors. So I'm going to tell you, I just have a lot of blessings, and I'm very thankful for my illness, for the changes it brought in my life, for the awareness of what the world really is, rather than where I was, which was kind of like in a dream world. When I first got sick, I felt like I was walking into a nightmare, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. But as I started feeling better and better, I found that there's not one day, there's not one moment of the day where I just don't thank my lucky stars over and over and over again for being functional again, for being able to see patients, for having gotten kind of forced into changing my career by the overwhelming response of the Lyme patients who found me in the walk-in clinic. It's just been wonderful. And you know, a lot of my patients say to me as well that they really feel like there's blessings with their illness, that they've learned a lot about life, they've learned a lot about themselves, and now they know better how to take care of their families. So while the illness itself is awful, I think it has a lot to teach us. And I think that really when you look at chronic Lyme disease, what you're really looking at is a change in how we look at medicine and how we look at health. That it may be that all of us normally have loads of bacteria living in us, but once we end up with Lyme and maybe some other factors, we will end up becoming ill. And so what we need to learn too is, what is keeping people well? The people that are exposed to Lyme, why are there some of them that just don't ever get sick? So I'm going to say to you, thank you for your time and thank you for your attention. You've been a great audience.
So now we're going to have Sue Faber and Jennifer Kravitz up here. They said to say that they are the ticking Lyme moms, and they're Lyme Hope.
Hello everyone, it's been a long day. I just want to personally say my name is Sue Faber. This is my sidekick, Jennifer Kravis. We just want to say we are so appreciative for each and every one of you for so many reasons. We were co-authors of the Ticking Lyme Bomb petition. I want a show of hands. How many people have signed the Ticking Lyme Bomb petition?
All right.
Okay, so for those of you who have not yet signed the petition, we need you to sign it. We are at over 40,000 signatures across Canada. It was this petition, because of the power of this petition, that we came to Ottawa just about 2 months ago now. It was because of the power of you that we got meetings with MPs, senators, and in 3 days we are meeting and testifying on your behalf in front of the Standing Health Committee here in Ottawa. And we are going to be speaking the truth for you. I guarantee it. I want you to know that there is power in signing a petition. There is power in writing a Lyme letter. How many here submitted Lyme letters to the Lyme Letters campaign? Okay, there is opportunity for those of you who have not yet written your Lyme letter. Please do it. We have 2,500 letters, and we are waiting to deliver them personally to our Minister of Health, Jane Philpott. And I will not give up until the day that she opens her doors and receives those letters and listens to what you have to say, hears your suffering, and does something about it. So please, please write your Lyme letter and sign the petition. Jennifer?
Just wanted to say that we are so thrilled at the outcome with the Health Committee. What has happened is that because of our meetings and the concerns that we raised to the chair of the Health Committee, to the vice chairs of the Health Committee, when the framework came out, they decided they were going to call an investigation into this framework. And that is the purpose of this study, as well. That Lloyd's going to be there, Dr. Ralph Hawkett's going to be there, Janet Sperling's going to be there, Sue and I are going to be there, and the Health Committee is going to hear a lot of what we talked about today. So fingers crossed that we can make something happen. We have 10 minutes each in front of the Health Committee to convince them to do something drastic. So we will do our absolute best. For those who want to learn more, you can go to the website lymehope.ca, and all the information about the Lyme letters is there, and the petition, and we have a Facebook page, Lyme Hope Canada. You can follow our journey and learn more about our work there. Thank you.
Just one last thing. Today I brought a box of dominoes, and I'm asking, I have about 100 left. I'm asking that everybody come and take a domino. And the reason I brought dominoes today is because each one of us is a part of the domino chain reaction. Did you know that a domino the size of 1 millimeter by 3 millimeters can knock over another domino 1.5 times its size? And in a matter of 38 dominoes, it could knock down the Empire State Building. From a 1 millimeter by 3 millimeter domino to knocking down the Empire State Building. That is the power of our community. And each one of us is one of these dominoes. And I just want to encourage you today that each one of you can do something to make a difference in the Lyme community. Each one of you. You all have a sphere of influence. You all have giftings and abilities. Some of you are bedridden, but you can still get on your computer and encourage somebody who's feeling isolated and alone. Others of you have connections and influence. You can do something. We need to work together. We must not work in silos. We have to come together, and I believe 100% that chronic Lyme disease is going to be recognized and treated in this country. And I believe 100% that when my daughter, all 3 of my kids have Lyme disease and they were born with it, I gave it to them unknowingly in utero. And I believe our government will get to the point very soon where they are going to acknowledge the disaster that is all across this country. They are going to do something, and we are going to be part of that solution. And so I just want to give you my 100%. Jen is going to give you her 100%. Come and get a domino, hold on to this domino, and realize you are a part of making history not only for Canada, but the rest of the world. Thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Sue and Jennifer. Now we have next up Kim Pike. She's a person living with Lyme disease and would like to share a couple thoughts. We do have just a couple more speakers for today. Vocal has been an amazing event, I would say, so far. Yes. It's great that the weather was nice. You never know. Imagine if it was pouring rain here today. No, thank goodness. Hey, are you Kim? Hi, nice to meet you finally. This is Kim Pike, and she's going to share some insights.
Hello. I know that everybody's had a long day in the sun. I will keep it as brief as I can. I'm just here to tell my Lyme story. When Leslie asked me to write a biography for this, I thought, does she want my biography or does she want my Lyme biography? Because as soon as you have Lyme, your entire life is different and it'll never be the same. So my Lyme biography starts with my youngest daughter, who got Lyme disease when she was 9 years old. We were lucky enough after a few negative tests to have a positive test. Can't hear me? There we go. And she was actually treated aggressively and was fine after that. So when I became sick, my own ignorance, I didn't even know that we had dodged a bullet, that she actually is 5 years now with no symptoms. I myself am 5 years sick. I've had a recent relapse. So I've been in the Army for 27 years. I was super fit. My career was on a rocket. And straight off of a deployment to Haiti after the earthquake. And suddenly I'm driving to work one day and one of my eyes stopped working. And then my heart rate, of course, went nuts. And I'm on the side of the road thinking I'm having a stroke. So I think, and I don't know about other people with Lyme, there's one day when you realize something is really, really wrong. And that was the day for me. So after, 8, 9, 10 specialists, and this is where the cash register sound should be in the background. 8 or 9 specialists, MRIs, CAT scans, bone scans, blood work, ultrasounds. A lot of specialists look at their little piece and say, well, those things on your spleen are weird, but can't explain anything else, and it's not cancer, so thank you, and, good luck. And I think we've all been through that at one point or another. Symptoms, healthy, 39 at the time, heart problems, dysrhythmia meds, blood pressure, sleeping 12 hours a day but not really sleeping, going to work every day when I felt horrible because I know everyone in the Army knows CPR and my kids wouldn't find me at the end of the day. What else have I got? So the biggest thing that is a problem with Lyme for me is that you cannot, even when you manage to find a doctor or some treatment, you really can't focus on getting well because you're always fighting the system. You have to spend more energy looking for someone to help you, someone to care for you, someone to actually believe you. And I did have a spectacular internal medicine doctor, Dr. Tim Cook, who even with negative Canadian tests, he said, I really think you have Lyme. You should go across the border, get yourself treated. And then I met Dr. McShane, who has definitely got my life back. And it's been I had 2 or 3 years of meds. I felt great for a year and a half, and then I recently relapsed again. So it's never really going to be gone, I don't think. The big thing for me is that the biggest effect I think that there is nobody for is the families. The families have to be strong. The kids have parents who can't do the things they used to do, and the kids and spouses are worried. Everybody's worried, but they don't want to tell you they're worried because you're sick. So in order to keep it fairly short, the framework is very important. It lacks a lot of detail, and I'll be honest, I'm going to use an overused phrase that we use in the Army. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So we need to get more information, we need to get more detail, and we need to get down into the weeds. How are they going to do the things that they say they're going to do? My last little note to leave everybody with, I guess. So in Ontario in 2015, there's reported 917 cases of Lyme disease. An hour away in New York State, the CDC reported that they have 30,000 new cases a year. And that alone, I'm not a doctor. I don't care about the politics. I want to be healthy. My family wants us healthy. If that doesn't raise a red flag, the ticks are not lined up at the border with their passports, waiting to get in, you know? So that's something that hopefully events like this will definitely sort of, the more people aware. I'm so happy to see people walking through here, asking questions, what's this all about? Oh my gosh, I didn't know all these things. I didn't know all these things either when I got sick, and if I did, I wouldn't still be sick today. So thank you for your time, and I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you.
So thank you. Next up, we're going to actually have a naturopathic doctor from Ottawa. She practices in Hampton Park Plaza. She's a Lyme literate doctor, and that's what she specializes in. I'd like to introduce Dr. Marie Matheson. For those of you who don't know her and would like to know her, we do have info pamphlets on the table there with her contact information. So Dr. Matheson.
I'm going to have to lower this a little bit. Thank you all for coming in today. I've been asked to pare down my speech a little bit, so you'll have to be kind if it's a little bit disjointed. I'm so glad you are all here to support and raise awareness to Lyme disease. I'm an Ottawa-based naturopathic doctor with a specialty in Lyme, and I recognize many faces here today. Many faces of patients struggling with Lyme, and some others who have already recovered. I began seeing patients with Lyme disease because, like many other doctors who treat Lyme, I was personally affected by it. My dear niece was bitten by a tick years ago. She's here today. And because she received adequate treatment in the U.S., she recovered and is still doing well today. Thank you, Maureen. Then I received a sponsorship from the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society to train with world-renowned Lyme literate pediatrician Charles Ray Jones, and his training really spearheaded my learning and passion to help people with Lyme disease. My journey followed with my own children's tick bites, which has created a passion and unrelenting willingness and interest to learn about tick-borne illness. And as hideous as this disease may be, I do find it fascinating to research. I'm going to skip this next part, talking about the myths we all know. So Lyme disease, as we all know, this is to the healthcare practitioners. It is a pandemic. Over the past few years, I've spoken at medical conferences with a presentation designed to share Lyme treatment information with doctors, NDs, and other healthcare practitioners. My advice to these individuals is to ask your healthcare practitioner whether they've actually been to an ILADS conference or a Lyme-related conference, because I can tell you that while there may be many differences in opinion on how to treat Lyme disease, there should be no question left about the rising urgency about the disease. All healthcare personnel, and I include fellow naturopathic doctors as well, need to go to at least one conference to get the latest information. It is a disease with far more occurrence than even breast cancer, and yet we may be at a point where some reluctant doctors need to be shamed into learning the current facts through gentle but consistent patient prodding. Healthcare practitioners can no longer just simply pull out the old Merck manual. The diagnosis for Lyme is mainly determined on clinical symptoms, so do not miss the signals. We are at an age where once held medical truths do not carry the same weight and promises and hope as they once did. Chronic Lyme disease has emerged as an example of healthcare at crossroads. The proponents of one team zealously cling to the belief that Lyme disease is simple, limited, and straightforward to diagnose and treat. And the other side believes that the condition is complicated beyond reasonable expectations. I believe it takes a team to get better. So my wish is for the medical community to embrace the work of naturopathic doctors to assist in healing Lyme patients. Lyme treatment simply isn't about full eradication of the infection, if that's even possible. It's about treating the whole body that has become dysfunctional. And this is where naturopathic doctors come in to help by treating the disturbed physiology, modulating that immune system, and changing eating habits that contribute to the toxic load. So now let's raise our voices to the provincial and federal politicians to do more to support Lyme disease. I've studied this framework that was released this week, and although we are taking some steps to prevent the control of this emerging infectious disease, I acknowledge that the framework is an important first step, but there is so much longer of a road to go. It's important to tell you that naturopathic doctors played an important role in the consultation process, which was captured in May 2016, and that naturopathic doctors are very much interested in being part of the ongoing solution and would welcome the opportunity to collaborate alongside with traditional doctors and patients in regards to prevention, control, and treatment. Now, more directly to the politicians, and I would suggest the following thoughts to act upon. We need to forge our own federal and provincial path without being lemmings, simply following the US CDC guidelines. Canada has great researchers, but in my humble opinion, we are mistakenly and blindly following a questionable organization from the US, and it is leading to worse healthcare decisions for the average Canadian. We need to research topics of transmission from human to human through congenital breast milk, sexual transmission, through blood transfusion, and organ donations. We need to involve more Lyme specialist doctors in developing guidelines. Bench researchers with no clinical experience can only provide of the needed picture to build a good guideline. We need to establish Lyme specialists in Lyme disease and vector-borne illness. And surely, infectious disease specialists should know how to treat Lyme disease. We need to emphasize professionally that clinical diagnosis of Lyme disease should always trump test results. The absence of proof is not proof of absence. I believe that there is hope for all patients. With the continuing communication that occurs among the various practitioners to treat Lyme and related conditions and their open communication with patients, the obstacles will fall quickly enough to break this disease wide open. When doctors truly listen to their patients and to the disease and remain open to new alternative and naturopathic modalities and new philosophies of treatment, then we will all be on our way. My name is Dr. Marie Matheson, and I'm proud to stand with all of you to call for a change in understanding Lyme more truthfully and supporting those afflicted with the disease. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Matheson. So Wendy is a person living with Lyme disease, and she'd like to share a story. You're on to what?
Well, you'd be happy to know I'm the last speaker of the day. Woo! Thank you so much for sticking around, because I was afraid everyone would leave and then I would get, my psyche would be damaged. So thanks for staying, appreciate it. I want to thank my MP, Bardish Chager, who met with Elise and I this afternoon. I explained about the framework and what's missing. She says she's going to be speaking to Minister Philpott about it. And this is the third time she's met with myself and my family, and I'll be working with her in the future. So that gives me some hope. So that's good, right? And thank you to the organizers of Vocal. It's been an amazing day, and I have hope. I'd like to introduce my daughter Elise, who has Lyme since she was a baby, and I nursed her. I made her stand up here with me because she's the strongest Lyme warrior that I know. I'm so proud of her. She's my best friend, and she's never known health, and I want that for her. The other day, as I was driving Elise to school, I pulled into traffic. I said to her, "Elise, check my purse. Is there poo in there?" And she said, "Yeah, Mom, there's poo in your purse. Don't worry." And I was like, oh, thank God. Because only chronically ill people would want to have poo in their purse. And you all know that that was a lab specimen drop-off, right? I only carry poo in my purse when I'm on a first date and I might need a quick exit. So, my name is Wendy Woodhull. You might know me from Waterloo Region Lyme Disease Group or from Grandpa's Run for Lyme Disease. Thanks, guys. My 74-year-old dad ran the 7,389 kilometer distance of Canada. And it took him 22 months and 8 pairs of running shoes, but he did it, damn it, at 74. Yeah. He raised a lot of awareness and a lot of funds for the kids and I, because as you all know, we can't get help here. He wanted to be here to thank you all in person. He couldn't be here, so he asked me to please hug each and every one of you before I go. So hug line starts over here. It might take us till 10 o'clock, but you're going to stay, right? Yeah, you will. I'm 47. I've battled Lyme disease, Babesia, and Bartonella for the last 20 years. I almost died at the end of that first decade because I spent that entire time treating the wrong illness. I found out the second 10 years that I'd given Lyme and all of the others to my children through nursing. And you're all familiar with the battle from then on, so I'm not even going to touch that. But I will be starting my third round of treatment from my third relapse pretty soon. But I'm still here. My physical symptoms were constant, fearsome pain and extreme fatigue. I lost so much cognitive ability I could hardly remember anything. I had heart palpitations and would have fainty, seizure-type episodes all over the place, grocery stores, library, you name it, I fell there. My children had numbers to call when I was on the floor at home, and my entire family was on red alert for decades, and frankly, they still are. I have, over all those years, lost my career, my marriage of 20 years, my dream home in the neighborhood I grew up in, and the one that I wanted my children to grow up in, my sense of identity, my sense of self, and worst of all, the potential that I had to be a contributing member of our society. I lost who I could have been and what I could have done, but I am still here. Humor and having Lyme disease are kind of polar opposites, but humor is a tool and a weapon that I've used and abused all my life, and so when I got sick, it helped me through a lot of dark years. And you have to see the humor in living in the best country in the world with free education, and by the way, the hottest prime minister the planet's ever known. Woo! Y'all know I love Justin. Wherever you are, baby, I'm here. And free health care, and still be sick after 20 years with a completely treatable illness. Free health care only rocks if the medical community can test you, diagnose you, and treat you before you die. So, why am I still chipper and happy right now? I think it's because I used the tools and weapons that I had, or I learned, to move through those dark years and battle after battle that I kept winning, although it never felt that way at the time. And this is the message of my speech today. We don't have to lose ourselves forever. We don't have to let this illness take everything. We can fight. I fought using humor, positive thinking, and gratefulness. And with the support of many people, and so many of you are here today, I'm still here! With humor, I can laugh. I can still be me. If I can make others laugh, then I still have a place in the world and something to give and to contribute. To be able to leave a person feeling happier than before I met them, and that means I beat Lyme that day. And anything that beats Lyme makes me feel good, makes me feel powerful and strong, and it helps me do battle with Lyme again the next day. Positive thinking is another of my formidable weapons that I choose to use. I like to look at the positives in every situation if I can. And I'll give you an example. So picture me on my worst days, bedridden, racked with pain, isolated, depressed, feeling hopeless for a year, knowing I was going to die, and being so drugged up. But I kept thinking, it could be worse. It could be worse. And then I would list all the different ways that it could be worse. Like, I could have Lyme and live in North Korea, right? And not only would I not get treatment in North Korea, but I'd probably be arrested and tortured as a spy. I try to tell them, I just have a bacterial infection, and I'm from Canada. But then they wouldn't believe me because everyone knows Canada has the best healthcare in the world. So why would I come to North Korea for a cure? Well, same reason we go to Germany or anywhere else where we try to find cures. I picture myself getting off that jail floor and grabbing a laser pointer and giving a PowerPoint presentation to the guards on how most Canadians go to other countries for treatment. I tell them about the IDSA and the CDC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, the Health Minister, ignoring all of the thousands of us, and the College of Physicians and Surgeons who should be fighting for us with the true power of science, and basically everything you heard today, and it would shock those North Korean guards. But when I add that this has been going on for decades with no discernible change, they faint from the pure shock of it, and I'd escape. It can always get worse, guys. My third weapon of choice is gratefulness, and I have found this to be the most powerful. I'm lucky I was raised in the church that I was and in the family that I was, because that concept has been my comfort and sometimes the only thing that's pulled me back from that abyss of rage and resentment and self-pity. And when I started hating healthy people, and feeling down and crying, why me? This isn't fair, and I can't do this. Not one more moment. I know you've all felt that way. I can't do it one more second. Something would happen, like my Elise or my James would come in, and they'd hug me and tell me they love me, and suddenly I'd feel some new strength and resolve trickle in again. And those little things made me grateful to be alive. They kept me fighting, and I'm still here. So I got the hint, and I started consciously looking for things every day to be grateful for. And when my dad started Grandpa's Run for Lyme Disease, that was really the solidification of the gratefulness. And now I try to pay all that forward to the people who are living in their dark years. Because those dark years do end. You do find your way again. You can beat Lyme. Even if you still have it, you can beat it. I know, because I'm still here. Last week was pretty horrific for Elise and I had to pull out all my coping techniques that I'd put aside for a while. I had the humor, the positive thinking, and the gratefulness, the big three, but I also used my family and my friends, and a lot of my Facebook friends, as you know, and music this past week, and alcohol, but I'm not going to get into that. I proved to myself that I can rise above dark times and stay me. I can win even when I'm in dark times, and so can we all. We're proof of that right here, right now. Look at us. I'm so proud of all of us and the work that we've done, big and small. Whatever we can do, we're doing together to fight for the change we deserve. I said to my kids for a lot of years now, behind every door is a challenge. Their challenge may be easier than having Lyme, yes. But their challenge can also be a whole lot worse. And we don't know what people are dealing with. But Lyme is our challenge. So we will meet it head on. We will stay true to ourselves. We will refuse to be lost within the illness. And we will stay who we are. We'll laugh anyway. We will stay as positive as we can, and we will find something to be grateful for every day. Because we are Lyme warriors. We are strong and beautiful people. We will keep fighting, and believe me, Lyme warriors, we will win. And it's only a matter of time. And we are all still here. Say it with me. We are still here. Thank you.